I'm talking consciousness today and why I believe it works. I have a few opinions about it. First off, it's January 31st. Did you catch the super blue blood moon? Super because it's closest proximity. Blue because it's the twice full moon of the month. Second full moon, sorry. Blood moon because there was a lunar eclipse. They say it was every 150 years this happens. I haven't done the research, so I have no idea. But I missed it, so you probably did too. I don't know, maybe you caught it. But at the same time, memorous event, so documented. Last time in the very first video of 2018, I explained my 5 principles, kind of what I'm guided by in life in a somewhat of a way. And I have an extra one, but just to recap, first one being patience. You got to have patience to get anywhere with the spiritual. And when I say spiritual, this is in reference to you and your individual journey, as well as your interaction with the outside force you may know as spirit. But the second thing was be aware that you'll never have a definite answer. It'll always be given to you in mystery. And it's up to you to decide. It's your free will to decide what the answer is to whatever question you may be asking. That's the point of the game. That's why we're here, is to experience life to what we can experience it. And can we go outside our box of reality and kind of find that magical spark again? That's what I feel. The other one, keep an open mind. Number 3, always keep an open mind. The minute you lock your mind down into any belief, any category, any idea, you kind of limit your abilities. You can't get much further. We also had what you give is what you get. Basically frequencies. Whatever frequency you're thinking is going to be the life you're creating. You can be thinking straight chaos and havoc and madness and anger, or the opposite of happiness and joy and excitement and possibilities. It's up to you. But whatever you are thinking is going to project into your real life. It may take a day, a couple days, but you'll see the reflection coming back at you. And that's kind of another magical part of this reality we live in. But more about that later. One of the last, but also most important, is you. Like, you have to keep paying attention to what those impulse thoughts, images, words, moments are in your brain when something occurs. When there's a circumstance, a happening, interaction. I mean, any given moment of the day, you are basically interacting with something, somehow, some way, whether it be the floor, whether it be the door, whether it be a person, whether it be an animal or a place, doesn't matter. Your mind is a compass to where your spirit wants to take you. And again, more about that later. Another principle that I remember that I didn't include, that is almost like the most important. And I say it because there's been many times that without this principle, I would have been in a loony bin, a madhouse. It's like, well, let me just tell you, the principle is basically, remember, this is always hard reality. There is, no matter how magical you get with it in your thinking, no matter how spiritual, how invisible, how wondrous that this invisible world is, you can't let it drag you down. You have to understand that the reality you see in front of you is the reality that there is. Because without saying too much, but trying to explain what it is I'm getting at, is you will get lost in your own delusions if you don't remember that fact. You will get lost in possibilities of what the world is if you don't always remember that the reality is the reality. Like, you can't go any further. And that's kind of where I'm going into with this talk, because one of the things that I like to address with consciousness is that we all carry it. We all have the same exact thing in our head. What I'm thinking of in my brain may not be the same thing you're thinking of, but that internal voice that's inside of you is almost the identical being, you could say. The difference in what creates my personality and your personality is, quote unquote, the ego, yes, but also the perception. Whatever perception you have in your world, whatever perception you have in your reality, that's going to be the reality you experience. Now, it could be stemming all the way from birth to being a toddler, to a child, to your adolescence. Everything was structured and conditioned around you based off of what you perceived from your parents, from your family, from your friends. That perception alone has created a different individual, but still the same thinker internally. So although your personality may be different, that same character that's inside of your head, communicating with your own self through its own self-talk, through its own self-thought, it's the same thing as mine. So always kind of remember that everybody's consciousness, no matter the racist, no matter the bigot, no matter the God lover, no matter whoever it may be, they still carry the same consciousness that you carry. We are all one of the same. We are all children of the same source. And when we get into these talks, it gets a little weird because when I you fast forward to my world, I'm in a weird understanding where I kind of get that we are all one, we are all separate, and it's happening simultaneously at the same time. Our 3D reality doesn't let us understand that. We can't understand it. There's just no possible way that we can understand the higher dimensions. But what I can tell you from my understanding is that both outside and inside is occurring simultaneously. And it's almost like a weird dream. The dream is you're experiencing reality as reality, but you have connection to the dreamer, which is in a sense you. But yet every single person you see around you is part of the dream world, which if you think about your own dreams, if you're experiencing dream people, those dream people are still you. They're just reflections of you. And that's what I feel this reality is. But it's on a level that we can't fully grasp or comprehend. We'll never get the answer until we're gone. And if that's so, we'll never know, even when we're gone. That's one of my first principles is you got to be satisfied with a mysterious ending. You have to determine those endings. You have to create those endings. You have to be able to make those endings for your own journey, your own path, your own understanding. Because in ancient teachings, understanding was a whole nother beast of its own, because knowledge was separate from understanding. And the two together combined created the balance that was the Gnostic, the knowledge and understanding together, which was Sophia, Greek word for wisdom. Whole other tangent that's going down, but one of the main topics I wanted to cover with consciousness is that we are all one and the same. Whether you feel as different as you can be, as separate as you can be, we are all one and the same. So, I've been busy this week. I've been trying to get a few things going. I'm going to try to keep this a simple video just to kind of get an update going. But in my personal life, I was getting a car or a new used vehicle. I'm pretty psyched. I got my 4x4 truck again that I once had, but I lost. And I'm just back to where I started. But at the same time, I'm just happy I could be back here again. So I'm ready to go 4x4 and I'm ready to get it's a Yukon. 04 Yukon. So I'm pretty psyched. I mean, it's pretty, it's my type of style. But the whole time we were out there searching for this car, because there was a possibility I was going to get a Hemi 300 because that was the wife's dream car. And then there was a possibility I was going to get a Benz because that's my dream car. But then there was all these little catches to them. Like the Benz had this automatic error on the dash, and it was just obvious that there was something wrong with it. They didn't try to ignore it. They just basically had it for cheap. The Hemi 300 was a super sick car, beyond ridiculously fast, but we were going to be giving up so much and trying to make this down payment and payment possible because we only had $1,500 to work with. So they wanted our $1,500 and another $1,500 in disbursements along the ways, and it was just it was going to do more damage than good, but it was going to be a vehicle. So we ended up doing the exact same in the end of it because we went to this place that was going to report to credit. That's what we want, was a credit reporting agency. And in the end, when we said no, we weren't going to do it, we ended up at this other spot. Well, it wasn't until we were signing the papers that he said, yeah, we report to credit bureaus. And so that was a funny, ironic synchronicity. But when I started this journey, I was so unsure, like I was just like, I don't like going to get a car because of the payments. Every time I've gotten a car, I've always been able to just pay it outright. Never really had to worry about payments too much. So when we're doing this, I'm questioning the whole time, like, is this right? Is this the right thing? And it wasn't until we saw the truck, and then the truck was just like our old truck, but instead of the XL, it was the normal. And as we get out to test drive it, we test drive it, everything seems good, but the gas gauge doesn't work. Well, first appearance doesn't work. We went ahead and took it back to the dealership guy. We test drove another one, Magnum. Just didn't like it. The tires already had to be replaced, so it was just like more stuff. When the wife got inside to the place and I'm out at the truck and I'm looking in the engine, I see two ravens flying above the sky. And if you know me, birds are a definite symbol for me. So the fact that they were ravens, there's a kind of a small story that I relate to with ravens, because in my very first meditation where I actually experienced my visualizations, I experienced the raven flying into me and startled me out of my meditation. Ever since then, the raven has kind of been my guide in a way. And there's a few instances where it's come to me. Like in a Colorado trip, we spent 2 weeks in an RV that I rented, and the raven was like my first visitor. Like as soon as we crossed the border and pulled over and started looking at a waterfall that was in nature, a raven, and funny enough, again, when we talk about this world being like a dream, that raven flew down to the wall that I was standing at and was maybe about 10 yards away, and it started hopping to me. And the minute that the kids and everybody had hopped out of the RV, like it had already taken off. Like by the time I had turned around to see everyone coming out the RV, the raven was gone and flew away. So it was like a definite meant for me type of situation. So when I am looking at the truck and I see the birds, it's almost like a definite confirmation. Okay, this is the one to go ahead and get. Well, we get it, and when I start to drive it home, we take it for a drive later that evening, if not the whole evening. But it looked like the temperature gauge was rising up, and it was going over 210, and that's not normal for, most cars. But I've had this truck before, and I know what the gauge used to stay at, and I knew it was going over where it was supposed to, and I'm like freaking out, like damn, because every time you buy a car, you think about heads and the gaskets, are they warped? Are the heads warped? Are you gonna have to replace the engine or do some work to get to the engine? So I'm tripping out about it, and I'm paying attention. So then I notice that there's a leak. I pay attention to what's going on. Why is there overheating? I find there's a leak. The next day, which is a Sunday, because we got it on a Friday. Saturday, spent the day out, and then realized the situation occurred. Sunday, I went ahead and tried to diagnose it and found out it was the water pump leaking. So I went ahead and got the water pump, replaced it out. It was a 4-hour job that should have only been an hour, but I ran into a couple hurdles. Like the thermostat was like a whole housing with the thermostat in it, and like I broke it apart, so I had to go get the different housing. And all the way around, you could consider this a headache, but at the same time it wasn't, because this is the journey to my excitement of being able to be out camping again in the woods, in the wilderness, etc. Like I love my nature. So when I get the water pump installed and get through the hurdles, the the temperature gauge goes even further, and it literally goes beyond the 260 mark, and it's like now 3/4 past the 260 mark, which 260 is the max number on the gauge. And now, like even now as I drive it, it's like halfway down the middle of the bottom. But come find out, in those model of vehicles, the cluster gauge, the instrument panel, actually like has issues. Like it's common, it's a known issue. So it gives me an excuse to get my Escalade dash that I want, because I used to have that in the old truck. So it's in a way an excuse to get it, but at the same time I'm hoping once that gets replaced, everything's gonna be fine. But ironically, this is the other part to that story, is that when I got the water pump, as soon as we were driving away, there was another black raven, like massive, like 3 to 4 feet tall, hopping around in the dirt field that was right next to AutoZone. And I just so happened to like not use the 4x4, but romp the dirt to get through the curb and to the other side of the road. And as I'm doing it, the raven's just hopping around me again, like around the truck. And I'm like looking at him, just kind of baffled and boggled why he's around, or he or she. And when I take off, it starts following above us and is flying above us, goes on top of the light. But it was a sign. It was something to be aware of. So I kind of knew at that very moment that there was something fishy about this water pump, that it wasn't going to be the fix, and that there was going to be an issue. And then in the end, sure enough, the issue was the cluster, like the instrument panel. So it proved me right in my own thinking. But some would say, like, it's just a bird, like, why are you considering this bird a sign or a symbol? And part of my world that I live in now is that one of the things you have to understand is that you carry that consciousness. That consciousness that you carry determines every A and B choice that you make. Every A and B choice that you make leads down a destination that another consciousness has already predetermined. Another person, another being, maybe even another animal. So when you realize that that consciousness you carry is the same that's in the world, in every single animal, every single person, every single thing, maybe even down to a rock, gravel, the wall, because it's made from the earth. I mean, anything that's you could see in this world is basically has some form of consciousness, whether you believe it or not. Now, it may just be pulses of vibrations, positive and negative. No matter what, though, everything is always vibrating. That's why you see it. That's why there's the possibility of sight, is because this thing is vibrating at a rate that is so intense that is making it possible for you to see. So does that mean that spirits and everything don't exist because you don't see them? Well, if you understand colors and the range of frequency that colors exist in, there's a very small spectrum that colors even truly exist for our eye perception. Animals see different levels of it, so therefore they could be seeing into the spirit world. But at the same time, the band of frequencies that exist are infinite. So we only see a small spectrum of frequency through our naked eyes. And there's so much more that could be out there that we're unaware of. And then this is where multiple, dimensions exist, parallel worlds. If you ever seen Fringe, if you haven't, I recommend it. It talks about an anti-world, a parallel dimension that is the anti-world. Like, in a weird way, I feel like I got shown that series. But you could also blame it on those who are in control or power, want to pre-program and lay out a map, per se, for you to be able to follow and fall into. A whole lot of craziness. But main point to the story here that I'm trying to tell is consciousness is all one and the same. When you experience these synchronicities, these magical moments, these things that seem like a miracle because you were just thinking about it, you were just, in this position to where you needed this thing, and this thing shows up through somebody who happens to be a friend of a friend of a friend, or so many different examples. The only reason that is possible, in my opinion, is because consciousness is emitting and receiving. And not only from your own perspective, but from every other perspective, from every images, every object, every animal. I mean, infinitely. Everything is projecting, and you are either receiving it or sending it. And just like a magnet, it finds each other to itself. Your mind will make the proper decision to turn at this point. When it decides that, I'm tired of this way, I'm going to turn at this point. And it leads you right to where you're supposed to be. It's all because the consciousness you carry, it's leading you. But that consciousness is a gateway into the higher self, quote unquote. Your true, in my opinion, your true self. But that's a whole nother story. So we're going to get there. I'm sorry for mean delay, but life has been chaotic. I'm trying to make this updatable, so I myself can go back and see what it is that's going on in my life. Because if I can continue this for a good period of time, since I don't like writing, this will in a form be a form of diary. Through the process, I can also hit highlights of opinions, which I want to do and I'm trying to do. But I'm not worried about the likes. Don't worry about trying to like it or comment it, or at this point, it's not what I'm going for. I'm going for documenting, and I'm going for information for those who are craving it. Because if you are interested in this topic, I can almost put money on it that your mind is reaching out in ways that you probably don't even understand. Like, it's trying to find answers that you just want questions and answers to. Like it's, I already know. I've been there. This whole learning experience has been that. So we'll leave it with that. Have a great rest of the day. I'm Michael Smith, and until next time.